not sure, and if you're studying for school, keep at it. But for a couple of minutes, we're going to talk. We'll be the loudest talkers in the room. I'm the founder of Brain Aid Fest, the logo in the bottom right there. We're going to have some bands tonight, but we're going to start with a mental health conversation. I'll let them each introduce themselves, but this is Tim Hinkle, he's a therapist. This is the mayor of Athens, Clark County, Georgia, Kelly Gertz. And this is my friend Patrick Ferguson, who I'll let him introduce himself first.
Well, I am Patrick Ferguson. I am a musician, first and foremost, but I also do a podcast called Crash and Ride, where I interview musicians who survived anxiety, depression, addiction, and abuse. It's a long-form interview podcast, and I founded it, I guess it's been about 7 months ago, after having a lot of conversations with musicians who were sort of struggling to control their depression and sadness, and after losing a few friends to suicide or overdose or whatever. So Crash and Ride podcast is what I do in addition to playing with a bunch of bands.
You're playing tonight with 5/8.
These are my drums.
Thanks for being here, Patrick.
Thanks, Stephen.
So I'm Kelly Gertz. Stephen mentioned mayor of Athens, Clark County. But certainly long before that, I was somebody who cared a lot about human services and human needs. Spent a little more than 20 years working with middle school and high school students, many of them, various array of health crises. Certainly have had my own personal experience with friends and family members who suffered from mental health challenges and addiction, and certainly been subject to suicide, sadly. And just grateful to be in a community that really cares holistically about human health, and want to do everything I can to support that in the role that I'm in now.
I just while you were talking, I remembered how last year, I'm not sure, it might have been after a musician, like a celebrity, might have been lost to suicide. I don't like to say committed suicide. And I'm not sure if it was just friends only, but you just threw it out there that here's my phone number, call me if you're struggling. And that's what everybody needs to do. I need to do a better job at that too. Most people just say, oh, reach out to me if you need to. But no, we need to reach out to people who are isolated and showing signs of distress. Yes, don't put the onus on them. Because actually they don't know how to reach out. Like I'm two sides of a coin. Sometimes I'm very social, and sometimes I'm just by myself, and it's an interesting universe up here. But this gentleman helped me out for a couple of years. This is Tim.
Hey everyone, I'm Tim Hinkle, and I'm a licensed professional counselor at Family Counseling Service of Athens, which is a private nonprofit counseling center. We accept most insurances, but also have work with clients on a sliding fee scale. Also involved with the Athens Justice Project, and we provide treatment for the Athens Clark County DUI Drug Court, and have for the last 27 years there worked with persons who struggling with depression and addictive disorders, as well as other mental health disorders.
That's huge. Thank you for what you do. I just wanted to start by talking about really quick, and I didn't learn about this until I visited the mayor and commission meeting a couple months ago. Actually, as part of the SPLOS project, or SPLOS tags, there's a proposed mental health recovery facility project. And some of you might not have heard about it, but it's going to be a $5.33 million project. Let me just read it really quick so everybody knows what I'm talking about, since I don't have an overhead projector. This project will provide funding for land acquisition, design, construction, and/or equipping of a mental health recovery facility project, and/or renovation, improvements, additions, and equipping of an existing facility so as to provide residential-style facility for individuals with mental health and potentially co-occurring addictive diseases. it is anticipated, to the extent permitted by law, the facility or facilities will be built in conjunction with one or more public or other private partners that may provide additional capital funds to the project to support SPLOST funding, and what would provide the operational funding for the facility. Like, I'm just interested in how people who are suicidal, how we can take care of them better. The program is envisioned to provide a facility or facilities to provide congregate living style facilities that could accommodate group and or individuals for counseling. An example of a potential partner organization may be, but not limited to, Advantage Behavioral Health Systems, a community service board duly created and existing pursuant to the constitutional laws. Additionally, to the extent allowed by law, funds may be used as matching for leveraging grant opportunities. Kelly, would you in a nutshell, and then let's talk about all the nuts. How did this project come to be, the idea?
You've recognized that those capital project descriptions are riveting text, I'm sure.
Yes,
everybody.
yes.
So we provide ongoing support for advanced behavioral health services. If you're not familiar with what public supported mental health infrastructure looks like across the state, there's a series of community service boards that Stephen just referenced. And so we're part of a region that stretches really from Greene County in the south up to Elbert County, it comes to the northeast, and it includes about 8 or 10 counties around here. And we, as the largest population center, are the place where people tend to come for needs. And so we've got ballpark 30 beds right now, but we always need more.
Right.
I think the reality for anybody who's been in need or seen a close loved one in need is that they need stabilization. Life becomes overwhelming, and simply being in your own room, your own four walls, isn't always the most successful place for you. Oftentimes you need a higher level of care than you can receive at home. So we've asked the voters to approve, among a series of other projects, this $5 million expenditure for our coming SPLOST package that's going to be in front of folks on November 5th. So early voting starts the 15th, so I encourage folks to get out there and begin voting. In addition to this project, we fund about $180,000 of care every year through Advanced Behavioral Health Services. And then we've got a couple of new projects that we've collaborated with them on. One is what's called a co-responder unit. So there's been a police officer and master in social work, or LCSW actually, who's been out beating the streets for about 18 months. So if any police officer in the system encounters somebody who exhibits need and who doesn't need to be in the emergency room or doesn't need to be in the jail, but really just needs to get some services, this co-responder unit provides some support and attempts to steer toward that support. We just this month have doubled that, so now we've got 2 units on the street. Finally, we also are in the first year of what's envisioned as a multi-year collaborative with Advanced Behavioral Health Services and the Downtown Development Authority to have a street outreach person. So if people are out on the street, whether they're homeless or unsheltered or exhibiting other needs, the idea is that this person can be a frontline individual. You know, what I say to many folks is that because people come to Athens for everything, for education, for shopping, for dining, for entertainment, you know, we can't turn our backs on people because they come here for need as well. So the street outreach person is designated to be that first line of defense.
That's awesome, and I commend you and everyone else who's involved in that planning. I plan to vote for it. Everyone else can vote as they see fit. The last time I went to the hospital in Michigan, I'm not sure I was suicidal. I just couldn't function. Because the weight of it when you're not properly medicated, if you need medication, I would say you might need medication, therapy will probably help, lifestyle changes is almost certainly part of your recovery. But I walked in and I made them keep me for a week. I got on, and I'm still on that antidepressant. Other things have changed, but I also know that some people don't have the courage to walk in and say, keep me. I don't know what to do. I say that I have that skill, I guess, or courage, or not really courage, but my mom was my mental health hero. She always tried the next thing. And that's what I want to encourage people here to do. Maybe it's not realistic, but my goal for Athens is 0 suicides. We shouldn't lose anybody.
I think it's important that we should call out and commend Athens Clarke County for taking a step towards using some agency other than the police force to handle mental health issues.
Yes.
Because through the course of my podcast, I've interviewed several ex-cons. There are also musicians, and they were musicians first, of course, and then their drug use or emotional issues and landing in the jail. And we talked about, said, and unfortunately neither of these conversations happened on the microphone, but I said, look, you've been to prison. What would you estimate the percentage of actual criminals who are in prison is versus people who are in there for mental health or substance abuse or crimes of poverty? And both of them said, I'm going to give the state the benefit of the doubt and say 20%. And then the other 80% are in there because they couldn't get help for a drug problem, help for emotional issues, help for suicidal ideation or whatever, but the police only have one set of tools. So Athens Clarke County putting a social worker on the street to be an intervening step between crisis and incarceration is a huge thing, and I think it's a miracle to live in a town that has that. I'm deeply grateful for it.
It's the city of shiny, happy people, and everybody hurts. I would say that's mania and depression. I got both. How do you think that program will help?
Well,
It might get you more clients.
Well, that's true too. I think Athens Clarke County provides a lot of different great services. Public, advantage, private, nonprofit, recovery centers. There's a lot here, but there's still gaps.
Yeah.
And there's still people who don't have access to those services or can't afford the services. So I think that with everything we have, and I think that Athens Clarke County has a lot more, services than a lot of more rural places here in Georgia. But there's still gaps, there's still people not being served.
What are you going to do about it?
Well, I think this is a step in the right direction, and so I think voting for services for, these types of projects would help. I think that there's not a simple answer to suicide, a simple solution. Suicide is a complicated thing. Mental health problems are complicated. Addictive disorders are complicated, but there's not one type of service or therapy that works for everybody. But I think the more that's available and the more that are affordable to people, the better, because there's still gaps and there's still people who aren't being treated, who need it.
Absolutely. My main question that I probably should have said at the beginning, and I would like to have this conversation next year at the next festival, how can we do better? And that answer will change every year. With the institution of these type of services and this type of project, I can only think it'll help. I'm thankful to be back here because it's, I'm curious, was that the model of that institution for the mental health recovery facility? Was that modeled after any other city?
I think it's
Or did you invent it?
No, I think it's pretty common kind of setup. And so some of these beds are here already. We're just expanding that. In terms of some of that ground that I think we still need to cover, some of it transcends just the boundaries of our community. Certainly we're a college town, 39,000 students at the University of Georgia, a few thousand at Piedmont College, about 5,000 at Athens Tech, a couple thousand at the University of North Georgia campus that's just outside our borders. there's a lot of literature today about the challenges that young people are coming into college age life with. And among the things that I hope is that broadly, when people are in their teen years, they find people who first provide a level of stability so that problems don't get any worse than they naturally are, and that if problems do emerge, that they find some quick support. And so I think the university is sort of the same mindset. What do we do about the health of our 17, 18, 19-year-old folks who are coming into adulthood? It's funny, not funny, haha, but curious. I was going for a walk with a judge about a year and a half ago, and he had suggested, if I could just get every young person to 25 or 26, without getting involved in the criminal justice system, they would likely live a healthy life for the rest of their days. But just managing those first couple decades of life is a challenge, and so we need to be, I think, very focused on the front end.
I think we all can agree that adulting is hard. It's complicated. I'm a pedestrian, and I talk to homeless people, and I feel for them, because I know that if I didn't have the family support that I have, everybody has a limit, right? I was going to say a word I won't say here, a limit where they give up, but we don't want anybody to give up.
Stephen, I want to answer her question to the best of my ability. Because I don't have any real power, right? I'm a musician and a podcaster, but I can tell you this. Something I realized early on in doing this podcast is that musicians are kind of outside the framework of health insurance, and like we're not really engaged in social services as clients often. And I realized that no one's going to take care of us but us. And so I started a podcast because I feel like the framework that the 12-step recovery network gets right is one addict or alcoholic talking to another addict or alcoholic. Because when it's peers and there's that shared experience, there's a level of empathy that just doesn't occur in the therapeutic environment, which is not to in any way slight your incredibly valuable work, but I think that we don't have a 12-step program for depressed people. But part of my goal through the course of starting this podcast was to start these conversations so that we can see ourselves in other people, so we can talk about what it was like, what happened, and what we're like now. So I think that the official response to this, I may be Chicken Little with this, but I feel like we're in sort of a mental health crisis in this country right now, as people's material stability and economic is falling, and their economic precarity is rising. Just having your basic needs met is one of the foundations of mental health. And as those things fall away, more and more people are in crisis, and we see that in the level of opiate addiction. We see that in the skyrocketing rates of suicide amongst just regular working people. And so, I think that there will be an official response, but waiting for the cavalry right now isn't acceptable for people like me. So I started this mental health podcast. Stephen started Brain Aid. And I think that, when you say, what are you going to do about it? Man, I'm shoveling as fast as I can.
But that's a small group,
That's true.
That's that, a special interest group like us,
Well, so the thing about, and I don't
Which
want
I'm
to.
commending you, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't want to.
What is
Yeah, well,
next to you who has
you know,
power?
the mayor can only respond in ways that he's empowered to by the voter. right? So November 5th, we have a choice to whether or not to fund this large mental health facility. And in the meantime, it's going to take a lot of peer-to-peer engagement as a community for us to sort of lift each other up. But ideally, I have this dream of decommodifying mental health care to the point where there's a huge peer-to-peer network similar to the 12-step organizations all over the world, because I'm a recovery person, and I got sober in a meeting where there were people who owned boats and people who drove trucks for a living and people, who didn't have two nickels to rub together. And in that room, we were all peers because we all suffered from an addictive disorder. And I think that these kind of conversations, something like Brain Aid, something like the podcast, something like just these sort of grassroots this is the Sims Foundation in Austin, there's Nucci Space here, there's Music Cares from the Grammys, there's this grassroots mental health self-care network springing up as, ships of state are very slow to turn and respond. And there's this gap that's open between the ability for there to be an official response. I mean, even if like November 5th, 100% approval of this mental health facility, there's still going to be some bulldozer time and brick mason time and electrician time before we can open that facility. So,
And again, that's just a real specific, small group of people that it would serve.
do you really feel that way? I mean, I feel like if it's a substance abuse facility, you're going to have people coming from all over North Georgia. There's a huge meth.
But that's not everybody's problem.
Well, I mean, it's not just a substance abuse facility, though. It's a mental health crisis facility. So, I mean,
Which be familiar with advantage behavioral. Advantage behavioral causes mental health issues.
It could be.
I don't know anything about advantage
The
behavior.
quality of the care is not there.
What I think even folks who are in the community service board world will say is that the way that they're reimbursed today is not their preferred mode. I think, to some of Patrick's kind of point earlier, if you just think in a basic Maslow's hierarchy kind of way, the more that we take care of people's basic daily needs for food, for sustenance, for shelter, for safety, the less we're going to exacerbate whatever kind of underlying biological or chemical things are already there. So, I take that on as an enormous responsibility that while people don't think of it necessarily as primarily mental health support, really feeds into the ability to support mental health. So, in this community, we're doing a lot to create safer neighborhoods, great recreation spaces for young people. I think there's a lot more kind of in the ecosystem. If I was to step outside of local jurisdiction, certainly I would be somebody who would love to see kind of absolute universal health care, at the very least a public option system, at the very most a sort of Medicaid for all kind of system, just so that, I think in Patrick's language, we're not commodifying everything. There's not a buck to be made off of every essential service.
Yeah, not knowing anything about Advantage, so I can't really address that. But I do know that the vast majority of social services organizations operate with a tremendous budgetary shortfall for the work that they want to do. So I think that if we commit as a society to funding resources for the least of us, then it benefits all.
I'm not saying I'm just saying that that's great that it's happening, but there are a lot more needs than that.
I completely agree.
And I would like to hope that Advantage is constantly wanting to know how they can do better. I would like to hope, because there are gaps in every organization. How can we be better? I think Tim knows.
Well, I was just going to say, I would think in an ideal world that our nation's leaders, our state leaders, the much, I guess, larger governments would provide more monies for social services and mental health needs.
We have to ask for it, though. People
Right.
that are empowered need to be pushing for that. The people that have the health issues as system mentioned can't help themselves.
I agree with you 100%.
And so other people that can, you know, need to be fighting for this and to be proactive and to be preventative as part of the discussion and Maslow's hierarchy. You know, it's when you don't have that, the safety and your basic needs met, then you go into crisis. So preventing crisis, preventing people from needing to go to the facility that is, you know, being spent. So that's like putting a little Band-Aid on at the wrong end, you know, where you need preventative.
I think we're kind of all on the same page here, that we agree that like society has fundamentally failed its most vulnerable populations, particularly in the last 20 years, as income as economic resources have been sucked upwards and left, the vast majority of us have been left sort of hanging. I think one of the great things about Athens, though, is that it's really committed. Like when I first moved here, there were already more beds for homeless people per capita than any other city in the state. And as I've lived here since 1989, there's been a huge, Nucci Space is a remarkable service, and it absolutely, Nucci Space is a remarkable and wonderful and incredible thing, and it does serve this sort of population that I'm a member of as musicians, but like I'd love to see more things like that. Or actually, ideally, honestly, truthfully, I would like to see Nucci Space just become a rehearsal space because everybody's mental health needs are met. But in the meantime, you know, we're taking care of our own.
And thank you for that.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
I imagine, of course, universal health care will help, but we need support from businesses, the business community, so that mental health services everywhere can be subsidized to an affordable
Yes.
thing. And sliding scales are great, but one person who makes $50,000 a year might have a very different budget than someone else who makes $50,000 a year. But Nucci Space has saved my life, changed my life, because $15 is way more affordable than $100, which is what it costs for a therapist in a practice.
So, one thing I would like to talk about, so one of the things, the reason that I knew that there were more beds for the homeless in Athens per capita than the other city in the state was because I asked someone, why are there so many people panhandling downtown? And they said Athens is a hub for people who are homeless because there's two different community services, like two free meals and all these beds. And they said that like it was a bad thing. And I was like, we live in a compassionate community. And I feel like I have been a big booster for years that if you're a musician and you're living in Brooklyn or Anaheim or San Francisco and you're getting priced out of your ability to continue to make art and live there, Athens has a low cost of living, 5 different studios that have produced Grammy-nominated material. There's 8 million musicians here. And now, potentially, we're going to be this beacon of mental health care for creative people, which, man, I would love to be the lighthouse community for the entire country of creative artists and musicians and choreographers and writers and painters and actors to come and be here, and be okay, and be able to avail themselves of those services, and be able to live and create and have good lives. And if that's because we have Nucci Space or an expanded mental health resource network for creative people, then that's just a win-win for this community.
Absolutely, and also for non-creative. My joke was, what's the guy got to do? Learn harmonica to get some help around here? I'm still very much a novice at harmonica. This is probably a wide-ranging question, but right before my mom died of natural causes, that's my goal, natural causes.
Like how natural? Like piranha? Is piranha a natural cause?
Yeah, yeah. Something that I probably could have prevented, and then my last words would be like, I shouldn't have done that.
Natural causes, laughing too hard at Patrick's bad jokes.
Yeah. But before my mom died, she was a social worker, and we need more social workers. Like if we need more, if we're going to help people get more services, social workers and therapists are already overworked. I want to inspire young people to go into those careers. But my mom spoke to social work students at Wayne State University in Detroit, which is a pretty large university, and she spoke about stigma. And it's a very touchy subject, but and I'm sure it's different in every family. In my family, even though my mom, I say, is a mental health hero, it wasn't discussed much, even though she had, I don't know, it's a generational thing. I'm the most outspoken mental health advocate in my family, in my generation, but how, I say stigma is cracking. I just want to get to the point where it's cool to seek services. You get a high five from your friends and family and other peers. So if anybody seeks services because of tonight, I will high five you. But and I think podcasts and more media will only it'll help somebody. Like I like to say, these concerts, the music's great, but what's said between the songs or before the songs are probably things that'll echo memories more so than songs. Like when David Dondero played the first Grammy Festival 2 years ago, he was very open about talking about his relationship with alcohol, his relationship with depression in his family, and his whole thing was like, depression is real, it's in you. For me, it's chemical, but it's also situational. But you can battle it. It's a part of you, and your survival skills are unmatched. I'm undefeated. I've never lost a day, even though I've lost some days. But what can we do to advocate for people to seek more services? I don't know if there's a single answer. Just by living, I mean, obviously we're living as outspoken advocates for mental health care.
I want to go back to something you said just briefly. It sort of answers that question, but you said we need more social workers. And I definitely agree, but I also feel like my own experiences with the last few years, I have friends who are working with social workers, and there's people who have 3 or 4 years right out of college, and there's people who are right before retirement, but there's this dip in like experience because it's such an underpaid job.
Right. Just like teachers.
I mean, the staffing levels and budgetary allocations for social work and like for DFACs, for example, in this state haven't changed in 20 years. In the meantime, there's been this explosion of pathology between like meth and opiates and depression and rates of suicide. So like those people's caseload is sky high. People get out of college, they do it for a couple of years, they get exhausted, and they go find something else to do where they're so close to retirement, they're like, I just gotta hang on for 2 more years. But like, I think that this initiative to create this multi-bed facility with lots of social workers who work there, I mean, that's gonna be a professional job, 40-hour week, you know. Like, if you create an opportunity, people will take those opportunities. Like, there will be more social workers. And in answer to your question about how to make seeking services cool, it's just having people, like millennials talk about their depression. Like, just jump on Twitter, hashtag depression, you'll see it, you know. I think that stigma is cracking largely because people are tired of buttoning up and pretending they're okay.
You don't need to.
I always think about that, the willingness of people to talk about their self-care, their own kind of seeking of mental health services is in some ways being sort of class and race-based. You know, I mean, I'm a middle-aged white guy with a few degrees, and you know, in my set, it's not uncommon for folks to have been in some kind of therapy. If that's only in the context of, say, kind of marital need or something like that. I think a lot, though, about, some other members of my family and kind of friend circle who are kind of in a working class sort of dynamic. Certainly all of the African American or Latinx families I've worked with, and I would love to see the same degree to which the 50-ish master's degree recipient crew are versatile in those conversations be true kind of across race and class lines. I can certainly think about the generation before mine. I lost an uncle to he overdosed on a speedball in the 80s, and big parts of my family of origin were kind of working class folks, physical laborers. It was not cool in that set to talk about your addictive needs, your mental health needs, and so I just always want to make sure we're getting outside our problem.
Absolutely. How could we market like definitely middle class, upper class white people use these services more. I'm reminded of I read Daryl McDaniel's book. He's in Run DMC. The book is called 10 Ways to Not Commit Suicide. I saw one comment online and said, wow, he's really good at not committing suicide. But there was a meme with him in it that said, therapy is gangster. I would like vulnerability to be seen as a strength. My mom had a pin, and it's mine now. It just says vulnerable. TED Talks help.
Yeah, there's a TED Talk on vulnerability.
Yeah. What's her name? Brene Brown?
Yeah.
Brene Brown. But vulnerability needs to not just be white women. It needs to be white men of every race, sharing, like just being vulnerable. Like I think we all are right now, right here. It's not an easy fix, but it's slowly improving.
I'm interviewing Killer Mike.
What's that?
I'm interviewing Killer Mike this fall.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
From Run the Jewels. He's a big advocate for young men of color to be honest about where they're at.
Right.
And I asked him if he wanted to talk about that on the podcast, and he said yes.
That's amazing. I did not realize that.
That's the person I've talked about.
Yeah, and you're also going to talk to Mike Watt and
Mike Watt,
Henry Rollins.
Henry Rollins, yeah.
I have a poster that says everybody has mental health, and everybody loves somebody with a mental illness. Not everybody has a mental illness, but everybody loves someone with anxiety or depression or trauma, and we can all do better in helping those people, helping ourselves. Self-care is not always my strength, but tomorrow's a new day. There's a friend on an online support group, Dudes Helping Dudes, that I started last night. He goes through peaks and valleys, and those valleys are deep. Because he's got some physical challenges but I would say it can't get better unless you stay. And things can only get better, and you can be better because you have been. So I think we just need more social media and just be more open about it, so we get more help. And because the suicide numbers break my heart.
It's crazy.
In America, it's 45,000 a year. If we keep going up, it'll be 1,000 people a week.
Certainly in this conversation that we've been having as a nation about gun violence, I think
Right. Absolutely.
Reality has come up again and again that half of those gun deaths are suicides.
60%.
Yeah. There's
Not to mention the veterans.
yes, veterans. Yeah, we need to take care of them. We train them to be killers overseas in conflicts of war, but we need to help them get reintegrated into society, and it's hard. I'm not going to ever say it's easy, but I also say that everybody's relationship with themselves is different, and so it might take a year, it might take, you never just get totally better, just learn how to, and isolation, and I had a question written down, but I don't really know how exactly to say it. Free events like this are great, but just get people out of the house. I find it easier to have a vibrant social life here. Like in Detroit, where I grew up, in the suburbs, and like most cities in America, because the car is the driver of everything. Like you're in your car for 10, 20 hours a week by yourself, and isolation, and the repetitiveness of modern life. Work 40 hours, work 50 hours, drive home, get therapy, because of the repetition. But I don't, there's not an easy fix to that. But of course, I think some issues are being debated in democratic debates.
Should we open up to see if there's any questions?
Absolutely.
Because we're in the last few minutes. Does
Thank
anybody
you so much.
here have any questions or?
Or statements or ideas.
Ideas?
Yeah, how can we do better?
Community support. I love your peer support discussion.
Thank you.
And there is a program of some kind of peer support that is state funded, but it's I guess more incarceration focused and addiction focused. So it's not, and it's very, of course, like everything else, underfunded, but the concept is great.
Can you tell me the name of that organization so I can?
Well, it's through the hotline. I don't know other than peer support, other than it being called peer support. And it's through the 800 number.
The suicide hotline?
Is it the suicide lifeline?
Yeah.
Suicide prevention
Yeah.
lifeline? 1-800. Is it 274-8255? I almost got it memorized.
There's a song about it, which I should know. Yeah. By a rapper.
Also, the social worker Road is also looked into that program, which is, I've experienced it myself, and it was helpful, but then there's a big gap, and trying to get services at family counseling center, but again, it was outside of my financial ability. Transportation, and if you do find, things like I've gotten really isolated, and these people here called me and said, hey, this is going on this weekend.
Awesome.
And he helps me get around.
Thank you.
But, this has been an ongoing problem, and I have that, don't give up today.
Right.
The
Yeah.
new experience. And I need to get out and have community support. And that I was hoping to hear from you all today, where can I get community support? And I'm really persistent and
Follow through.
yeah, and I mean, I put so much energy. I guess I have a really strong survival instinct, and I kind of wish I did because it's really hard.
No.
I'm super
It's
glad
good.
you're here.
It's good, yeah.
But I'm using my
You could be
voice,
an
and
advocate.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to do that. I'm in a position now where I feel a little bit better, and I'm like, this is what I experienced, and you presented an opportunity, and that's why I'm a little bit agitated, is
I
because
appreciate your,
I've been frustrated in Samaritan closing,
Yeah.
That was a huge hit to a lot of people.
I didn't know about that. I should be more involved in this stuff. As Stephen said at the beginning, if you suspect that someone in your life is withdrawing, suffering, don't wait for them to reach out to you. Reach out to them. Because my experience with depression is that you don't want to be a burden on anybody. You feel like you're bothering people when you bring it up. And the thing I discovered on the other side of the table is that a lot of the people who I didn't want to bother had boundless love for me and care, and but they didn't know to reach out to me. So,
Or how to.
yeah, if we leave everybody here with one lasting impression and thought, I would say, don't isolate, don't let your friends isolate. This is a community. We're lucky to have this place in Athens because we come out and gather in places like this. I've lived in other cities, you know, as Stephen said, you go to work, you go home, you go to work, you go home, you go to work, you go home, you go out and eat, you go home, and people don't gather, so.
I think that's a great strength of this community. I mean, certainly it's what kept me here, is how easy it was to be included in Athens. Whether you knit or play frisbee golf or love to jump up and down at rock shows, there's plenty of that camaraderie here, and I think being part of that camaraderie is what helps keep us all healthy.
Find your crew.
Stephen, you have the Dudes Helping Dudes Facebook page, but it's the sort of bit of gender exclusivity in the name. Do you know if there is a Facebook page for people who might be in her situation who are dudes on Facebook?
Well, I'm trying to start human beings helping human beings.
All right.
And the only rule in these groups is no trolling, no negativity. I mean, we all just need support. It's so hard to be vulnerable, for guys especially.
I think for anybody. I mean,
yeah,
we live
of course.
we live in an increasingly competitive society. As resources dwindle,
I hate that.
yeah, and people are afraid to ask for help. And they're afraid to show their
And now we're
vulnerability.
competing for services, right?
Right.
That's not right.
Yeah.
We all need help. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out.
She's got a question.
We have one more question.
Yes, I'm just curious, so if you know somebody who's, obviously struggling mentally, emotionally, you don't know what to say, in your
Right.
experience, what's a good opening conversation to help them, encourage them to
Tim is
get
our
some kind of help?
Yeah, let's have an awkward conversation about
Tim is our resident therapist. How do you open?
how to have these conversations.
Well, I think what's probably most helpful is when you share your own experience with, mental health is universal, mental illness affects everyone, if not each of us individually, at least someone we know or been close to, family, friends. So I think, it's, instead of coming across as someone giving advice or being an expert, it's really just speaking from the heart of what your own experience is with that. And again, it's that connection, having that connection. And then there is, again, I guess it's knowing the resources for where you're at, like in this town, that you can maybe help connect that person with or get them there. To just like she was just saying, that helping someone, giving someone a ride, offering, I guess, the kind of basic help to get them to wherever they hopefully will get more help than what you can.
And beyond the crisis hotline, there's also a crisis text line. I had the idea, but I know it would take a lot to organize. What if we had a crisis hotline that was Athens-based? So an Athens person knew they were on the phone with someone local.
Yeah.
Because the commonality is what, although I think tribalism is our downfall, but being in the same city as opposed to calling someone across the country might just help people feel a part of the community, because it's the loneliest feeling, to feel like you need to disappear because the pain is so much.
There used to be a hotline through the Clark County Health Department.
Oh, really?
1-800-HELP.
Okay.
So 1-800 something help.
Yeah.
And it was 24/7, and it was health education, but also mental health.
Mhm,
So people could call it, and
Were people staffed in an office
yeah,
for it?
Yeah, and actually we could answer the calls. I used to work on it, and you could answer calls from home. Because,
Right.
if it was on Meg Street and nobody
Mhm.
wanted to walk on Meg Street like
Mhm.
20 years ago,
Mhm.
and at night, in the middle of the night.
Did it go
So,
away?
Yeah, I think Teen Matters might still have it, and
Uh-huh.
I think there's also, the Clark County Health Department may still have it. But it was pretty great,
Yeah.
and had all the resources.
Mhm.
and always growing resources.
But I would think with these phones, we can
Right?
ruin the world, but we can also save the world, because you can sign up for an hour and
Right.
you'll be on call, and I mean, and it's not always about saving a life or the extremes, but of course that's very important. That you can just help people to take a positive step to self-care that could transform their lives, and they could become a mayor, or they could become someone else great, like you.
Well, the mayor has to go host a porch concert.
Yes, yes. Shout out to Porch Fest, and shout out to Athens, and thank you all for being here. And,
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.